They say that only failures become revolutionaries. That those who perpetrate violence in the name of a great cause only do so because they've failed at everything else in life. In other words, they only become revolutionaries because they've achieved nothing of value in the real world. But I ask you to consider whether any of you might use the word failure to describe the likes of George Washington or Alexander Hamilton, of Samuel Adams, Patrick Henry, all of whom committed high treason. Our founding fathers were not mere talking heads or political pundits. They were not the sort of half-hearted activists we see waving signs in front of City Hall today. These were powerful men who petitioned their government in vain. These were men of action who, failing to gain the respect of their government, took up arms against it. Where are these men of action now? Have we such a just government today that it deserves our dog-like obedience? I ask you all, are we lesser men than our forefathers? Have we lost our revolutionary spirit? God forbid. For if we have, we no longer deserve the name of Americans. Powerful men who had much to lose gave all to fight their revolution. Those powerful men knew that it was their responsibility, nay, their duty, to lead their countrymen to freedom. And then let us consider these powerful men of today. Forgive me, you powerful Americans, but I question your motives and your loyalties. Supreme Court justices, I question your impartiality. Representatives, I question your sincerity. Senators, I question your judgment. And Mr. President, I question your objectives. Do you seek to defend your countrymen against the corrupt, or do you work hand in hand with the corrupt for your own advantage? Do you seek to serve your countrymen as leaders, or do you higgle and haggle for power by debasing yourselves for a few votes more? Do you seek to protect the freedoms guaranteed by the revolution, or do you act as slaves to your parties and your lobbyists in order to secure more funding for your re-election? The rich among us are slaves to the whims of the government. The poor among us are slaves to the money of the rich. And our political leaders are slaves to the polls, the parties, and the purse. Where are the free men? Where are the brave? Who among us would sacrifice himself for the good of the country? Who would step forward and decry this degeneracy and suffer the slings and arrows of the media and public opinion? We ask ourselves these questions every day. We complain to our friends and to our families and to our co-workers. We complain to strangers at the market and at the coffee house, at breakfast and lunch and dinner. But who has looked in the mirror and had that most honest of moments? Who has said to themselves, I'm part of the problem, for I've done nothing to better my country. I've only complained. It is an irrefutable maxim of history that every nation gets the government it deserves. When our elite have failed us, when the machinery of government is broken down, we must decide, will we accept their failure, or will we take up the mantle ourselves? In America, as in ancient Rome, the Senate is the most august body of the Republic. Its members guide the nation's policy, both foreign and domestic. They're empowered to conduct investigations and to impeach government officials, to approve of presidential appointees and treaties the United States may enter into with foreign nations. The very name of the Senate has its origin in the Latin word senex, meaning an elder. The senators were intended by the framers of the United States Constitution to be the guiding lights of our nation. Senators were never meant to sway listlessly in the open air, blown by the faintest breeze of public opinion. They were meant to defy public opinion, They were to act as leaders. And yet we see our senators acting not as wise torchbearers, but as the weather vanes of public sentiment. As I said, it's the duty of the powerful to lead. It shows a despicable lack of character for a person with power of any sort to neglect the service of his country. And so I have decided it is time I did my duty to the country that bore me. I hereby announce my candidacy for the United States Senate. I would that our country resumed its mantle of greatness. I would that we regained our economic strength. I would that we resurrected the nobility of our forefathers in ourselves. That we might see our leadership of the world not as a spoil of empire, but as a service to the dignity of humankind. I want the government restrained. I want the budget balanced. I want wild spending to cease. I want the drug war ended. I want our military to stop fighting wars that serve special interests instead of the interests of our country. I want our civil rights restored. I want laws that the average citizen can actually understand. These are not my desires alone. I've heard these words spoken by countless of our fellow Americans. We share the same vision. And as a United States Senator, it will be my honor to transform that vision into a reality. A long campaign here begins. We will have danger and trouble. We will be mocked and derided, blackmailed and blacklisted, but such is to be expected when attacking those with vested interests in a dishonorable system. Such is the fate of those who struggle for truth and justice. You will, without doubt, hear much about my past and my religion, about my indulgences and my failures, about my ruthlessness and my indiscretions, and the things you hear may well be true. You say you want an honest politician, here I am. These attacks will do nothing to me personally, but I must warn you of the effect they may have on you. Keep in mind always that these attacks are paid for by the vested interests you would bring down. Remember always that our movement will only be as strong as you. If you have faith not just in me, but in yourselves, we will see this through to the end. I ask you all whether we may dare claim ourselves to be heirs of our revolutionary forefathers, if we will not stand in opposition to our government, whatever harms may come of it. How much easier is it to donate and to volunteer and to knock on doors and to vote than to bear arms? Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton alike would roll over in their graves if they heard us say, it is impossible to elect a third-party candidate. The government has fooled us all into believing that it must be perpetuated the way it is, lest the heavens fall, and that it is in any wise impossible to change it. The British government said much the same thing to the American colonists, but the colonists refused to accept this. The power to change this government does not lie with some future movement or some other generation. It is within each and every one of you present in this room. It's with you, Alexander and Aiden. It's with you, Jezebel. Yay. And Juliet, now that you're an adult. It's with you, Diane. And with you, Alan. And with you, Drew and Giovanna. So I must ask you to make sacrifices, not for me, but for our country. If we would save our country from our government, we must not be afraid of attacks in the media, or of the pessimism of our neighbors, or even persecution by the police. You have been told since grade school that you have the power to change things. But your teachers may have failed to tell you that you also have the duty to do so. One finds no cheap talk in the cannons of Washington. His crossing of the Delaware was no mere metaphor. The men under his command were farmers and merchants, ill-fed, with shoes poorly cobbled, fighting the most magnificent military force the world had ever seen. Many an American died by a red coat bullet, and we dishonor their sacrifices in accepting the failures of our government. Let us accept them no longer. Be strong, fear not, and may God bless the United States of America.